Hello, Milwaukee Bucks fans. Welcome back to Bucks Latest presented by Fan Arch. I'm your host, Dean Simon. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and also turn on those post notifications to stay up to date and in the know with all the latest Milwaukee Bucks updates. So, this first one on the docket, this first little bit of news is one that we could have seen coming, that it was talked about pretty heavily in the weeks leading up to Summer League and immediately after the NBA draft. But the Bucks' number 47 overall pick, Bogi Markovic, he decided to return to play professionally in Serbia for the 2025-26 season. He'll be going back to KK Megabasket in Serbia, and that was reported by the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel on the 28th. So again, this was pretty widely reported at the time, and of course, all throughout Summer League, though he did appear in all five Summer League games for the Milwaukee Bucks, averaged about 12 points, 48% shooting from the field, 15-ish percent from three. Could not knock down the outside shot, but he also did show a lot of potential in a lot of other areas. That he was pretty agile on the break. He was a pretty good passer. He was pretty skilled for his size, but his limitations really showed up on the defensive side of the ball, that he couldn't guard guards on the three-point line. He just couldn't guard out in space in general. And that was really, I won't say his downfall in the summer league, because he still had a pretty decent showing, still trying to get used to NBA pace, even though these guys aren't like really NBA caliber players, still trying to get used to the NBA style of basketball and all that. So a pretty respectable showing from Markovic, but he still has a lot to work on at 6'11". Just again, in terms of moving his feet on the perimeter. But one thing that you could say was a pretty big positive for Bogey throughout the summer league, and I guess going forward, maybe looking towards the 2026-27 season or somewhat later on, is that he looked to be kind of a Doc Rivers guy. It seemed as though Doc Rivers took some interest in him, at least somewhat, throughout the summer league, and was trying to kind of work him, not necessarily into the Bucks rotation in any way from the outset, but he was still trying to put his mind towards, like, oh man, like how would he fit into the lineup? What position would he play? What kind of play style would he bring to the Bucks rotation, like potentially alongside a guy like Giannis, a guy like Myles Turner? What could he offer? And Doc saw the passing skills. He knows that he's a pretty versatile player, but it's all about him just putting it together at the next level, again adjusting to game speed at the next level, and that's going to be his biggest thing. But now he will go back to Serbia. It's not even necessarily clear that he will remain a part of the team going forward into the next year and a half, as the 26-27 season approaches. But he's still definitely someone to keep an eye on, and certainly someone that, again, that Doc Rivers had a lot of interest in uh, throughout the summer league. So next up, we're going to talk about not Bogey's fit in, potentially in the lineup if he were to remain a member of the Bucks throughout this next season, but with Kyle Kuzma, and specifically optimizing Kyle Kuzma, as Brew Hoops Jack Traherne said in a recent article. And he kind of debated how Kyle Kuzma would fit in alongside Giannis again after the pretty horrible showing that he had in his first half season with the Bucks, and the first uh, bit of the playoff run. Certainly did not. I don't want to even say live up to expectations, because he did not put together a great year in general, in total, as a member of the Wizards and then as a member of the Bucks after the Middleton trade. So he definitely has a lot still to work on in terms of fitting in with this kind of culture and with this team in general. But what Traherne said and what he suggested is that there are going to be several different ways in which that you or the Bucks could optimize Kyle Kuzma and have him fit into your team a little bit better. And several of those ways were, number one, playing Kyle Kuzma mainly at the power forward position, which is going to kind of, it won't have him shy away from taking threes, in total, but he definitely won't jack up as many outside shots, because he'll have other responsibilities closer to the rim. And for a guy that shot, as he mentioned in his article, it shoots maybe 33% for his career, it seems as though the three-point shot is becoming less and less of a consistent option for him on the offensive end. So maintaining him, or keeping him mainly as the power forward in most sets for the Bucks, I feel like could do, or could work wonders off the bench, because of course Giannis Antetokounmpo, Myles Turner, and even Bobby Portis would get time playing over him in the lineup at the four. But aside from a positional switch or staying at a certain position, also making him pass more, making him cut more, and having him attack in transition. These were also big parts of Trahern's kind of breakdown of how you could make Kyle Kuzma fit in this lineup. Of course, he likes to get down the floor. He's very agile for his size, and not even just talking about his off the dribble ability, his jump shooting ability, but he can definitely still run on the break. And uh, with the Bucks going into this next year, mainly being predicated on being a fast break team, getting huge stops on defense, blocked shots, getting in passing lanes, and then getting out and running. Kyle Kuzma could potentially have a huge part in the Bucks transition attack again alongside Giannis and other great athletes that they picked up. Even if, let's say, Ryan Rollins or Chris Livingston gets a push in the lineup, those guys could also factor in heavily in terms of their transition attack. So making Kyle Kuzma more of a transition threat, making him in half court at least more of a passer and more of a cutter, it could potentially work well for this offense just because these are tactics that just get the ball out of his hands and doesn't have it makes it that the ball doesn't stick with him for extremely long periods of time. And I feel like that's the way you have to look at this is that how can we utilize Kyle Kuzma in a way to where he can really impact winning, but he can do it, not as the consistently dominant on ball threat that he has been throughout his tenure with the Wizards or those closing seasons with the Lakers. So there's definitely going to be a change to his play style, or you would think going into this next year. But it's going to be interesting to see how it all really plays out on the court once opening night tips off and the Bucks really have to start taking things serious with him in the lineup, specifically as maybe their sixth or seventh man, I guess, behind Bobby Portis. But anyways, next up, it seems as though the Milwaukee Bucks were pretty interested in a Marcus Smart trade. Of course, he was eventually bought out by the Washington Wizards and then subsequently picked up by the Lakers to pair with Luka in the backcourt, get kind of Luka's like defensive dog partner at the point guard position that they desperately needed. And great pickup by the Lakers, but it seems as though the Bucks were showing somewhat of interest in Marcus Smart, and he was someone that we talked about for a minute or two on one of these segments in previous episodes when he was still going to be or he was trending towards being a free agent, trending towards that contract buyout agreement. And I wasn't necessarily on I don't know. I My opinions of him kind of varied over time because, of course, the injuries are going to have they're going to factor into how you evaluate him as a player going forward. Again, he's aging, and you could argue that his best years are behind him. But when you looked out at the vast point guard market in free agency this year, there he was among some of the best options left. Whether it was still like Russell Westbrook or Malcolm Brogdon or Dennis Schroeder or other guys, Chris Paul. Marcus Smart was right up there with them. Of course, a Defensive Player of the Year winner just 3 years ago, but the injuries and the trades going from the Grizzlies and then going to the Wizards, it has kind of taken him out of things a little bit. But Clutch Points Evan Damerel, he came out with a little report and he said that the Bucks, meanwhile, were searching for perimeter defenders to bolster their aging core and explored a deal that would have sent Pat Connaughton's expiring $9.4 million contract to Washington in a package for Smart or Golden State's Andrew Wiggins, which should be Miami's Andrew Wiggins, because that all happened after Wiggins was traded to the Heat for Jimmy Butler. Connaughton was instead dealt to Charlotte for future second rounders, but Milwaukee's interest in Smart underscores how highly the veteran is still regarded around the league. And that especially is true. Of course, we saw how interested the Lakers were in acquiring him and pairing him with Luka. And they, of course, have some high hopes for him that he can make a real difference on the defensive end and kind of help Luka conserve energy for the offensive end by just being a dog on the other end of the floor. And that's exactly what they're going to get out of him again if health persists. But he definitely would have been a nice option as well for the Milwaukee Bucks to kind of stabilize things a little bit more on the defensive end from the point guard position. But you will hope that bringing up Ryan Rollins again, you'll hope that he takes another jump forward, especially as a point of attack defender. We saw so much untapped potential from him this past season, and his potential to be a real two-way 3-and-D threat with great athleticism is real. I feel like he's not going to be the all defensive team player. He's not going to be the defensive player of the year caliber player that Marcus Smart once was, but Ryan Rollins can be one of the most solid defensive point guards in the NBA going forward for the next 2-3 years if things really go well for him. But anyways, last up on the docket is that it seems as though Pat Connaughton wants to exact some revenge on the Milwaukee Bucks because he recently talked to the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel's Jim Owczarski, and he kind of talked about the immediate emotions that came to him once he was dealt from the Bucks to the Charlotte Hornets, where, most people would think that, oh, he's going to Charlotte, so that's career purgatory, and he's not really going to come back from that. He's not going to prove that he's going to be a serviceable part of a team going forward. It's almost like his career's over. But from that, he kind of took a he has an edge about him now that the Bucks decided to deal him, and he himself told Jim Owczarski that he jumped to the competitive side, and nothing really changes on that. He said, "I still think it needs to be and will be a big year for me, and the competitive juices were flowing." That's essentially how I think I have been, not by accident, and that he was on winning teams essentially his whole life. And then later on in the notes and the article, uh, it was noted that Connaughton, he's looking to demolish, in Jim Owczarski's words, he's looking to demolish his old team every time he laces up against them this year. And could you really expect anything different from a guy, again, just as naturally competitive as Pat is and Pat was throughout his Bucks tenure? Of course, his role on the championship winning team in 2021, maybe if he's not there in 2021, they don't come away with the NBA title. So you would understand his emotions and his thought process of, every time we meet against them, like I'm gonna be going for it. I'm gonna be jacking up shots, and he's really gonna try and make an impact in those games and kind of show Milwaukee what they lost by dealing him for second round picks and just trying to get off of his contract. Instead, he's going to try and show them that my contract may have been worth it in the time that I was there, or at least through the last years of my tenure with the Bucks. So honestly, I'm very excited to see that because uh, with Charlotte, let's say Charlotte comes into town to play Milwaukee. If LaMelo Ball isn't playing, I feel like the entertainment factor kind of gets bogged down a little bit because he's been playing maybe 30 games a year for the past 2 years or so, and having Pat Connaughton on the other side to kind of make things interesting, it'll just make for a more entertaining product. There's now that there's a background story, there's a narrative here, and that'll make those games pretty good. Maybe make for a little budding rivalry. So who knows what that's going to look like? But I do hope that Pat is successful in his next chapter of his career if he can earn another contract going forward because he'll be a free agent next year. And that would just be amazing for him. And I would love to see him become a great piece of another contending team and hopefully get a second opportunity to compete for a title. But anyways, that's going to be it for me today. Thank you very much for watching another episode of Bucks Latest presented by FanArch. I've been Dean Simon. Again, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and turn on post notifications to stay up to date and in the know with all the latest Milwaukee Bucks updates. I'll see you guys in the next one, and go Bucks.